Okay, so now we're going to talk specifically about how to make an approach. So this is how to make a contact, and this is for people that you know. So we're talking about people that you know. And so, all right, let's just jump right in. So nothing ever is better than a real live conversation. And I say the ideal scenario is a voice conversation. Actually, the ideal scenario is a physical conversation, face to face, but that's not practical for actually making contacts in a normal setting. You know, you might do that as you go around in life, and lots of people are really good at that. But in general, you're going to be doing it by phone. But having said that, even though being on the phone is the ideal situation, you have a little bit of a challenge. And so I want you to think about this. How often does your cell phone ring and you know it's ringing and you look at it and you don't answer it? Probably a lot, right? Probably a whole lot. And then there's plenty of other times you don't even have the ringer on, or you know, you have it set to vibrate or whatever, and you don't even know that that's happening. But people don't answer the phone very much unless they are expecting a call, or they're planning on a call, or they literally are not doing anything else, because they're assessed in today's world, because there's so many different ways to be connected. People assess whether they actually want to be in a conversation at that moment. So people aren't answering the phone very much, but they are looking at it. They look at it on average every 5 to 7 minutes. And that is a powerful thing to know. Okay, so the ideal thing is to be in a voice conversation, but you have to get to it. So the optimal way is to do something that I call a reach. A reach you can do through a private message or a text, and it is simply a touch, right? It's a little touch to get you to a conversation. Now, it could be used in other ways as well, but if initially the ideal thing is to reach out and make a little reach on a text or a private message and say something like, hey man, trying to catch up with you, when can we chat for a minute by phone, right? Or, hey Mary, do we have a second to talk today by phone? I'm trying to catch up with you. Or hey, I got something to share with you, when can we chat? Or something like that, right? And then you want to get to a live conversation as soon as possible. I understand some of you are uncomfortable with that. And so could you make the approach without a live conversation? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's not going to be as effective because people can't hear your enthusiasm, right? They can't hear emotion. It's not nearly as connective. It's not nearly as personal. But yes, you can effectively work the business without having a conversation in the initial reach and then the initial approach. It's just not the best practice. It's much better to be in a conversation, not to mention from a long-term perspective, you want to build that muscle, right? You want to build that skill. And so it's way better to actually do a conversation, but you could do it with, just going straight with the approach in the direct message that, the stuff that I'm going to teach you will work either way. So after you've done the reach, then you need to know what I call the connector. Okay, so this goes back to, this is people that you know their need. So the connector is essentially the need. It's the reason that you're reaching out to them. And this is where it makes it so incredibly natural, right? So I want you to think for a second about a friend that you have and something that they like. Maybe maybe it's Betty and she loves shoes, right? And so Betty loves shoes, and you just found the most insane shoe store. It's awesome. You found some great shoes. What would you say to Betty? Say, Betty, I know you love shoes. I got to tell you about this shoe store, right? I mean, that's essentially what hey, you know about this shoe store? You would just be real about it, right? You would connect specifically. You would say, hey, Betty, I know you like horses. I found a shoe store. Right? You would connect with the thing that they care about, they're interested in, their need, right? You can fit it, you can use all of those things, right? Care about something, need, are interested in, need, that all fits in the whole connecting philosophy. But it's the reason that you're talking to them, right? So that allows you to say things like, hey, I remember you saying, or hey, we talked about, or you mentioned before that, right? So those kinds of things are normal, right? You got to use whatever words you would normally say, right? But you could then follow on with, hey, I remember you saying you were trying to lose weight, or I remember you saying you were trying to save money on, or I remember you saying you were sick of your job, or I remember you saying you were looking for a way to make more money, or I remember you saying that, you were trying to find some really good organic skincare. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Because it's real. And man, the fact that it's real, this is so incredibly effective. Anybody can do it. Anybody can do this. It's really, really effective. So you could put this in the reach, right? And the last one here is, are you still? Which you could do one of two ways, right? You could add this on, right? I remember you saying you were trying to do blah, blah, blah. Are you still doing that? Are you still looking for something, right? It's a really good thing to say. Are you still looking for a way to? That could be, or it could be your opening one. So you could say, I remember you saying, and then add it on, or you could just start with, hey, are you still looking for a way to blah, blah, blah? That's a great, great, great opening question. So the point I'm making is you could put this in the reach if you just were you just didn't want to. Maybe your time situation is such where you got to do more by text, or you just working your way into the comfort of the conversation, and you're willing to get less results because you are going to get to a live conversation when someone's interested, right? But maybe you just this gives you a way to get started, even if you're not going to talk, because you could put it in the reach. So then you shoot it out with a salutation, and then I remember you saying, or the last time we talked, or you mentioned before that, right? So you could use it that way as well. But the ideal is to make the reach, trying to catch up with you, and then when you get on the phone, you say, hey, I remember you saying blah, blah, blah. I think I found something, right? Then that's where we're going to go next. So it's very, very simple, very, very doable. Anybody can follow this. I'm not giving you anything fancy. And so then you would move to something like this. Again, we're operating with people that hey, I found, right? I found this blah, blah, blah thing based on I remember you saying, right? And my favorite, I just got to tell you, this was my favorite, and I just got to tell you, because I just said it. I got to tell you, this is an absolutely natural thing for me to say. I got to tell you about. Right? I must have said that, I don't know, a couple thousand times in my career as a front approach, because I've talked to warm market people multiple times over my career. And so you got to say what's natural. What I got to tell you about is it's just a normal way for me to talk. I discovered. People like discoveries, right? I mean, that gives people a license to learn about something they didn't know about. So it doesn't make them look like they don't know stuff, because if you discovered it, it's okay for them discovered it. So this is all great language that's all very applicable and very useful, and you can just pick and choose what you choose, right? And then something to add to this is, especially for the business, it might not be a fit for you. Or it might not be for you, or it's okay if it's not for you. It's sort of removing all the pressure. For a product or a service, you say, hey, no pressure here. It's just, I think this is awesome, and I thought you'd like it too. Just be yourself, be real. If there's anything I hope to do right here, is give you a license to be yourself. Because you are enough, and the way you operate is going to be fine if you're treating people properly. And then you would add, hey, it's okay if it's not for you. It's okay if it's not for you. See, what you're doing here is you're making it safe. You're making it safe for them to check it out. Okay, so if it's okay for me to not do whatever it is you're talking about, then I'd be willing to look. I like to say, hey, you know what? You can tell me no at any time. No problem. No problem. So these kinds of things are very, very effective. You just got to remember, you're not asking anyone if they want to sign up or buy here. That's not what you're doing, right? You are simply finding out who's interested in something, right? That's what you're doing. So a couple other things that you would add to this at the bottom, and this kind of wraps it up. Are you open to checking it out? Are you open to learning about it, right? This is whatever language you would use. And so I've taken you through a sequence, and you may not even have noticed it, but I'm going to walk you back real quick through what that sequence is. So the first step was the reach, right? The reach would also have a salutation depending on how close the person is, right? There's some people that you're so close to, you don't need to have a salutation. You can just send them a, hey, can you talk for a minute, right? But most other people, you got to say, hey, hi, Fred, hi, Mary, hi, Betty, right? You got to actually, like give them a salutation, right? So you got to reach, and then you have a connect to the need, and then you have what you found, right? But no names. You don't talk about, the name of your company or the name of your products, because then you give them the ability to go Google that. Then you make them comfortable. Okay, it's not for you, right? And then you ask a question. It's really that simple, right? So you make the reach, and then, hey, I remember you saying, and I got to tell you about what I found, or I discovered this really cool thing, and hey, it might not be for you, and that's okay, but are you open to checking it out? I mean, it's just so easy and so effective, and you have a very high percentage of people that are open to checking it out. It's very simple, and it's very non-threatening. Now, in my book, The Process, I have a boatload of examples for you in that book as well, that little book, if you've never seen that. Okay, so moving a little further, now that you've asked the question, you need to understand what's happening next. So anything other than no is a sign of interest, all right? You just have to understand that. If they don't say no, they're open to hearing some more, right? And the reason that's true is that if they're not open, they will say no immediately, because they're afraid you might pressure them or push them or try to get them to do something they don't want to do, and they don't want to be in that situation. And so they're going to say no right away if they're not interested. So you just need to know that that's the case. So anything else is a sign of interest, which means, okay, now we can really move further. You're open to something, so now I can help you understand what it is. So an ideal thing is, hey, let's have a cup of coffee and chat a bit. Make it sound too official, too, structured and scary, right? Not like, let's meet at, right, with my business suit on. No, hey, let's have a cup of coffee and chat for a bit. When can you meet? Or you might use an information tool, which I love to use information tools, because they are very duplicatable. So is a cup of coffee that's comfortable, not a pure presentation, but comfortable. But I love an information tool, and you always use this language. If I send blah, blah, blah to you, will you look at it by, or when, and then you ask, can you look at it today, or will you look at it today? But you gotta put a little gentle committer in there, and then you send your video or your audio or your recorded webinar or whatever your tool is at that particular time. We'll talk more about that stuff a little bit later. Now, you might get something like, hey, can you tell me about it? Okay, so first, I got to tell you this, and you just have to, you just got to wrap your head around this a little bit. You don't have any need to beg anybody. You need to have a little posture here, because you're the one with the life preservers. Remember, you're the one standing on the deck. And so that person in the water, if they're like, can you explain to me the manufacturer of that life preserver before you chuck it? You're like, seriously? You seriously want that? Right? You got to be from the perspective of, hey, man, it's okay if you don't want my life preserver. Right? So that's your mentality, right? That's your mentality. You might not use those words, right? Of course you wouldn't use those words, but you want to have that way of being. And so you can say stuff like, hey, well, how much time do you have right now? Because, it's going to take more than a minute or two for me to tell you enough for you to understand. And actually, I'm not pro in explaining this. It's it's all here in this information, or over a cup of coffee, I can tell you what I know, right? I mean, that's just real stuff, right? So you could say, hey, it's really cool, but man, it's difficult to explain, or in a short conversation. But I like to say, hey, how much time do you have right now? Because if you got time for me to tell you the whole story, and I have time for it, I'll do that right now. But that's usually not going to be the case, and most of the time I won't do that anyway. I'll just say something like, I don't have time right now. I've got a conference call here in a couple of minutes, or right, I gotta be out the door to an appointment. But you can always go back to, look, it's okay. It's okay if it's not for you, man. It's okay, right? You can begin gently taking it away. And most people don't want you to take something away from them, even if they don't know what it is. So just, that's a very, very strong, remember, you got the chocolate. You don't, you're going to give them all the information, but if you try to give them, you parcel out just a little bit, you're only going to tell them enough to say no. You're not, so unless you can tell your story, that's different, So if I say, how much time do you have, and I'm willing to invest another 10, 15 minutes, and they say, yeah, I got a little bit, and I say, okay, well, let me tell you how this happened, and then I tell my story. And so just by telling the story, I tell enough for them to be like, oh, because you put a lot of the great nuggets about what you're doing, about your points of difference in your product or your service in your story, and then people are like, man, I want to learn more about that, right? So you really position it when you do it. And then the other one is, what is it, which is really the same as above, right? It's the same question above. It's their way of saying, can you, they're interested, they're curious at this point. So you can be strong and just say, hey, man, I can't wait to share it with you, or hey, check this out. It'll tell you about it better than I can. If I send it to you, will you look at it, right? That's just how you handle this. A little more advanced is something I alluded to a minute ago, and that is a little bit of your story. Now, in the next module, I'm going to deeply dive into how to be really powerful in your story. And you can still use a little bit of it in a phone call if you want, because it's sort of your cause, right? Your cause people are attracted to, or your reason people are attracted to. That's the power of a story, is it starts to open people's minds up to possibility, and it makes it very real. And so you could say, hey, you don't know this, but, and then share a little bit about what you were struggling with, right? Everybody's struggling with something, and struggle is interesting, and struggle is connectable because everybody's struggling with something. And so, you share a little bit of the pain you were trying to solve and how you discovered this cool thing you've got, and now you're really excited or happy because this is what's taking place. And you could do that in a couple of minutes. And what you've done is that you have completely positioned the information, right? So now when they get your information, the information is stronger. It's more urgent. They're going to want to look at it to see what you see in it, right? As opposed to what's wrong with it. And so that's a little bit more advanced. You don't have to do that right away. You don't ever have to do it if you don't want to. But you might get to that place.